Chosen one, your intuition has been sounding an alarm for a reason. That unsettling hum in your closest circle was the sound of a betrayal being manufactured behind your back. You were never paranoid, you were perceptive. The reality is that these family members that were plotting to come up off your downfall are pissed. Let's talk about it. Before the drama, the plots and the backstabbing, there was just you. And the truth about you, the real truth, the one that explains everything that came after, is that you were built different. It was not something you could always explain when you were coming up. It was more of a feeling, like you were tuned to a frequency that most people around you could not pick up. You felt things deeply. You saw through situations quickly. You recovered from things that left other people down for long stretches of time. You had a resilience that sometimes confused even you, because you did not always know where it came from. You just kept getting up. You kept arriving at the other side of things that should have finished you, and people noticed. That is the part nobody warned you about. The people in your family circle noticed what you carried long before you had a name for it. They watched how things moved in your favor. They watched how blessings attached to your presence, how you bounced back from setbacks, how something seemed to cover you in ways they could see but could not touch. For most people around you, that was something to admire, but for a specific few, watching you carry what you carry triggered something cold inside them. It was not regular jealousy, it was something more calculated than that. The kind of feeling that looks at what someone else has and does, not just want it, but wants that person to stop having it altogether. Remember that calculation. Hold on to it, because it is the seed that everything in this story grows from. And what was planted in that moment of cold calculation is about to bloom in a direction they never anticipated. The people with that calculation in their hearts did not move immediately. That is the nature of this particular kind of opposition. It is patient. It watches before it acts. Before anything was organized, there was a season of quiet study. Your vulnerabilities were being catalogued. Your pressure points were identified. The corners of your heart that still held unprocessed grief, the childhood wounds, the family dysfunction, the pain that got handed down to you from people who were broken before you even arrived. Those things were located and quietly filed away for future use. They understood, whether consciously or not, that a whole version of you was a direct problem for them. A version of you that had healed the old wounds, released what no longer served you, and stepped fully into your own frequency, was almost impossible to reach. So their mission became keeping you from becoming that person. The goal was keeping your wounds open, keeping the chaos circulating, and keeping you so distracted by old pain that you could never get clear enough to see what was being constructed around you in the present. Every time old drama resurfaced, when it should have been long dead, every time an old wound got poked right at the moment when you were building momentum, every time a conflict broke out precisely when things were starting to move in your direction, that was not coincidence. That was deliberate maintenance. Someone was tending the exact conditions the plan required to stay alive. The people doing that maintenance were not strangers. They were the ones with the most natural access to your tender places, the ones who knew what your earliest wounds looked like, the ones who were present during the very moments that shaped your deepest insecurities. Every vulnerable thing you ever shared in trust became a coordinate they used to map your undoing. That is a specific kind of betrayal. It is the kind that does not just hurt. It rewires how you trust and makes you question your own discernment. It makes you wonder whether being open ever leads anywhere worth going. But that questioning was also part of the plan. Making you doubt your own perception was a tool they used deliberately. The fact that you are here right now, clear-eyed enough to see all of this for what it is, means that tool did not finish its job. What started as individual dark calculations eventually became something far more structured. This is the part that is going to reframe a significant portion of what you have experienced. Your adversaries found each other. The people who had each separately developed a problem with you, each carrying a private agenda around your downfall, discovered a shared interest, and began to move as one. Think about what it requires for people with different personalities, different relationships to you, and different surface-level agendas to set aside their differences and align themselves around a single objective. The very fact that they had to organize at all is telling. Individually, not one of them had enough to move against you, so they pooled everything they had, their access to you, their knowledge of your vulnerabilities, and whatever resources they could bring to bear. If this message hits your spirit, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can find it. At the center of this coalition, there may have been a parental or authority figure, someone whose position in the family gave them influence over how the circle moved and what the circle believed. This person likely presented publicly as someone who was in your corner, concerned and even protective. But behind that presentation was a specific investment in a specific outcome, and that outcome was not your flourishing. There were likely material stakes layered into this as well. Something about resources, an inheritance, a financial arrangement, something that was positioned to move in a particular direction depending on what happened to you. That is not abstract. That is a motive. And wherever a motive is that concrete, the plan attached to it is equally deliberate. The coalition was also watching your gifts develop, and that development was a problem for people whose influence over you depended on you staying smaller than you were becoming. At some point, the people organizing against you may have sought outside counsel, not for your healing but for your containment, not to support you, but to slow down or block what was growing in you before it fully activated. That is how threatened they were by what they saw happening inside you. The objective was not to make your life inconvenient. The objective was not to hand you a setback or even a heartbreak. Under the sustained pressure of everything being applied to your life, the expectation was that you would break, not just emotionally, but in a way that had finality to it. Whether that looked like your mental state deteriorating to the point where others could step in and declare you unfit, whether it looked like your health declining in ways that were difficult to trace back to a source, or whether it looked like your will to continue simply running out, the destination was your permanent removal from the picture. The coalition was organized around your permanent absence. Attached to that absence were real, practical things, arrangements that could not be activated until a specific outcome occurred. Your name was on those calculations. The question being answered by everyone involved was not whether the outcome would happen, because in their minds it was already decided. The only question was when. And while that internal clock was running, the maintenance of your suffering continued. The pressure stayed on. The wounds stayed fresh. Whatever darkness was circling your life was being actively fed. There was a season when the edge felt very close to you. The weight was heavy enough and constant enough that the darkest possibilities felt nearer than the horizon. You were closer to what the people around you were counting on than you probably knew at the time. They could see it. They were settling in and getting comfortable with the outcome they had been engineering. And then you did the one thing the entire plan was never designed to survive. You've probably noticed a lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have stopped publishing, videos pulled, voices silenced. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. That's exactly why I'm putting you onto something real, Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching Chosen Ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation, and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play, and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. Join Destiny Engine to support your favorite channels and use it for your own rise. It's a 360 win. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. It did not look significant from the outside. There was no announcement, no confrontation, and no dramatic declaration. You did not expose the coalition. You did not retaliate. You may not have even known the full scope of what had been built against you. What happened was quieter than any of that, and more powerful than all of it combined. You got tired of the wait, not the kind of tired that makes you give up the other kind, the liberating kind, the kind that makes you set something down and keep walking without it. You got tired of carrying grief that was never yours to carry. You got tired of bleeding for wounds that other people made. You got tired of being endlessly available and open for people who were drawing from you without giving anything real back. You got tired of looking backward when the horizon was right in front of you. In that tiredness, you made a decision that changed everything. You let go, and you let God. You stopped trying to fix what was already broken. You released the past without needing anyone to understand why. You started doing the actual inner work, the kind that does not happen in public and does not come with applause. You began releasing burdens that belonged to other people's stories, burdens you had been carrying out of a loyalty that was never returned. You stopped focusing on the wound and started walking toward the healing. That single shift, that private internal soul-level decision, cut the power source of everything that had been organized against you. Here is the mechanism behind why that shift was so devastating to their plan. The entire operation ran on your pain. It was fueled by your stuckness, by your focus on what had hurt you, and by the emotional conditions that kept you in a frequency they could work with. The moment you redirected your energy from the wound to the healing, the plan had nothing left to run on, and a machine that has momentum but no fuel does not simply stop. It turns. The pressure that had been moving in your direction reversed course, and everything that had been set in motion against you began moving back toward its source. This is the alchemy of a chosen one. You did not beat the fire by fighting it. You let the fire forge you into something it could no longer touch. You did not defeat the opposition by organizing against it. You simply healed. And your healing was the most devastating counterattack imaginable, because it was the one move nobody on the other side had ever planned for. Everything that had been aimed at you hit the shield of your transformation and returned to sender. The people who considered themselves the architects of your downfall found themselves standing in exactly the conditions they had spent so much energy engineering for you. The health crises that were supposed to land on you started landing on them. The sleeplessness, the spiraling, the anxiety, the inability to hold things together, those experiences became their daily reality. The pressure they had been applying to your life turned inward and began applying itself to theirs. The coalition started fracturing from the inside. When a plan fails at the level this one failed, the internal blame begins immediately. People who aligned around a shared goal have no real bond beyond that goal. Without the expected outcome to hold them together, the differences, resentments and suspicions between them all rise to the surface at once. The arrangement that was organized around your collapse is now occupied with its own internal warfare, accusations, disarray, and the particular chaos that comes from people who did dark things together and are now wondering what the other person might say if circumstances press hard enough. There is also legal exposure to contend with. Whatever was arranged in the dark left evidence. Organized darkness always leaves tracks, and the cover-up has become more costly than the original plan ever was. The people who were managing your supposed downfall are now managing their own exposure risk, trying to stay ahead of things that keep threatening to surface, trying to hold a coherent story together under circumstances that keep shifting beneath their feet. You are healing visibly. Every day you show up, moving, growing, receiving and arriving is a fresh and undeniable reminder of how completely the plan failed. You are not just still alive, you are stepping into the very season they organized to prevent you from ever reaching. And there is nothing left for them to do about it, except watch. That is a specific kind of powerless fury. Let them sit in it. While the coalition was organizing against you, some of those same people were simultaneously attempting to take what you carry and make it their own. Your gifts were being studied with the intent to replicate them. Your energy, your way of moving through the world, your particular style of attracting what belongs to you, all of it was being observed. Ideas may have been lifted, credit may have been claimed for things that originated with you. Your presence, your approach and your output were being watched and imitated in an attempt to absorb your frequency through proximity or through copying what was visible from the outside. None of it produced what they were after. What you carry is not a technique that can be transferred through observation. It is not a style that becomes available to anyone who studies it long enough. Your gifts are woven into the specific fabric of who you are, your lineage, your particular journey through fire, your wounds and the specific way you chose to transform them. Those gifts belong to you, the way your fingerprints belong to you. Nobody gains access to your anointing by watching how you carry it. The failure to copy you added a very specific humiliation to their position, because it meant that even the version of the plan where you were permanently removed would have left them with nothing. The thing they wanted from you was never transferable, it would have gone with you, and they were willing to organize all of that opposition, coordinate all of those people, and make all of those arrangements in pursuit of something they were never actually going to be able to hold. What makes this the most complete kind of failure is the audacity required to simultaneously work against you and reach to take from you. Resenting you and envying you at the exact same time is the signature of someone who has lost their internal integrity entirely. And that loss of integrity is precisely why they could never access what you carry. What you have requires a wholeness they dismantled in themselves the moment they chose betrayal as a strategy. You walked through portions of this without the people who should have been beside you. You navigated things that called for a whole support system while operating largely on your own. You healed without an audience. You built without backup. And there have been moments when that aloneness felt like evidence of something wrong with you, like you were being punished, overlooked or passed over, while everyone else seemed to have the community you deserved. The people who were supposed to be in your corner were the ones carrying the agenda against you. The family members who should have been your safe ground were the ones running calculations about your future. So when you found yourself without access to those relationships, when the warmth of those connections went cold or disappeared entirely, your spirit was not failing you. Your spirit was protecting you. You were being moved out of reach of the very people whose plan required your continued proximity to function. The aloneness was not abandonment. It was discernment made visible in your circumstances. Every connection that dissolved during your hardest seasons, every relationship that could not hold the weight of who you were becoming, every circle that did not survive your healing, those were necessary exits that happened at exactly the right time. You did not lose those things. You were freed from them precisely when that freedom mattered most. And you were never alone in the way that actually matters. You were guarded by something that does not announce itself loudly. It shows up as instinct that arrives before you have any logical reason for it, as protection you cannot fully account for after the fact, as the undeniable reality of still being here and still whole after everything that was organized against you. That kind of covering does not happen by coincidence. It happens because the purpose you carry is too significant to be ended by the people who tried to end it. In the middle of the targeting, in the middle of the manufactured chaos and the sustained pressure, in the seasons when the weight was at its absolute heaviest, something in you kept moving forward anyway. Your discernment got sharper, your ability to see through surfaces got cleaner. Your connection to something higher than the circumstances around you got stronger. The very pressure that was designed to diminish you was, through an alchemy they never intended, accelerating the thing in you it was trying to suppress. The attempt was made to create fog between you and your own clarity, to convince you that what you perceived was not real, that what you felt could not be trusted, that the things you knew in your spirit needed to be doubted. Sustained pressure of that kind, applied to someone with genuine spiritual sensitivity, is not a small thing. It can create confusion for a season, but fog always lifts. And what became visible on the other side of that clearing was your gifts intact, sharpened and refined by having been tested under exactly that kind of pressure. You now carry a wisdom that cannot be studied into existence and cannot be borrowed from someone else. You now see things that only become visible to a person who has walked through what you have walked through. The depth you carry today was carved into you by the very opposition that was trying to hollow you out. They made you better while trying to make you gone. That is a failure so complete it is almost difficult to comprehend. There is a layer of this that tends to produce the most lasting confusion, and it needs to be addressed directly. Betrayal from a stranger stings, but you can follow the logic of it. People compete. People act from self-interest. You can process that kind of wound and move through it. What does not process at the same speed is betrayal from the people who held you when you were small, who were present at your milestones, who said your name in prayer out loud while working against you in private. The gap between who they performed themselves to be and who they actually were in the dark is specifically designed to make you doubt your own eyes. For a long time it probably worked. You probably explained away things your gut flagged as serious. You extended grace the situation did not deserve. You told yourself the most charitable story about their behavior, because the alternative that people that close to you were that deliberate in their harm was almost too heavy to hold. What that confusion cost you was continued proximity, continued access. You kept showing up, kept investing, and kept being present in spaces where your presence was being used as a resource in something you never consented to. The confusion was not a side effect of the betrayal, it was a core feature of it. Keeping you confused about what was happening kept you available to the people who needed that availability to keep the plan moving. Every time your instinct flagged something as wrong, and you dismissed it out of loyalty to the idea of family, that dismissal was the plan working exactly as designed. And now, with the clarity that your healing has given you, you can look back at the exact moments your discernment tried to speak, and recognize precisely what it was telling you. You knew. Some part of you was already awake to the reality, while the rest of you was still holding the family story together out of love. That knowing was not paranoia, it was not ingratitude. It was your gift of perception, operating correctly under conditions that were specifically designed to make you ignore it. The amount of effort required to suppress what you were sensing is itself testimony to how powerful that perception actually is. You may still be sitting with some version of the question, why did this have to happen this way? That is a real question, and it deserves a direct answer, but there is a more powerful question underneath it, and that question is, what was already written into the moment they decided to move against you? There is a principle at work here that operates as consistently as gravity. When organized darkness is aimed at someone who is genuinely covered, genuinely called, and genuinely on assignment, the result is not simply a failed attack. The result is that the protection around that person activates at a level it would never have reached otherwise. And that activation carries consequences that extend far beyond the original conflict. Their downfall was not a punishment imposed from the outside. It was the natural result of what happens when darkness reaches toward something that has real divine backing. The moment the decision was made to move against you, the ending was already determined. The coalition simply did not know that yet. They were operating on the assumption that you were reachable, that enough coordinated pressure and sustained betrayal would eventually produce the result they planned for. They had no framework for a chosen one who simply would not cooperate with the ending they wrote. What they could not account for is that some people are unreachable in the way that actually matters, not because they are without weakness, but because what backs them does not negotiate with the strategy of darkness. Everything the coalition had, their resources, their relationships, their coordination, their spiritual capital, was spent on a campaign that could not have produced the outcome they planned. And now you are watching them absorb the consequences of that spending, standing in the aftermath with very little left and a set of results they are not equipped to handle. You did not do that to them. Their own choice did that to them. You were simply the occasion, the mirror that revealed by being exactly what you are, who they really were beneath everything they had been performing. Even with all the clarity, all the vindication, and all the confirmation that your instincts were right, there is still grief in this. There is the grief of what it would have meant if the people closest to you had actually been who they presented themselves to be. There is the grief of the family you deserved, the relationships that were supposed to nourish you, the sense of belonging that should have been a given from the beginning and was not. That grief is real, it is valid, and it is allowed to exist. What it is not allowed to do is keep you anchored to a past that is already finished. What it cannot be permitted to do is keep you accessible to people who have demonstrated clearly who they chose to be. Loving who someone could have been is not a sufficient reason to keep extending yourself toward who they actually are. You can grieve the family you deserved while simultaneously releasing the family that chose differently. Both truths can exist at the same time without canceling each other out. The grief does not require you to stay in proximity to what harmed you. The love does not require you to remain available to people who turned that availability into a weapon. Put that grief down with intention, not by pretending it is not there, not by skipping past the feeling in a performance of being over it, but by honoring it fully and then consciously choosing not to let it be the heaviest thing you carry into what is next. Because on the other side of that grief is a version of you that is fully open, available for the connections, the love and the belonging that were actually meant for you. The people who are genuinely for you, not positioning themselves around your story with a hidden agenda, those people exist. The gathering being prepared for your next season has no one in it who is waiting on your fall. You are almost there. Stop walking around like someone who barely survived something. Start walking around like someone who won, because that is the accurate description of what happened. The coalition organized. You transformed. That is not a draw. That is a comprehensive, decisive and total victory. It is time to carry yourself accordingly. Stop replaying the details of what was done to you. Stop trying to reverse engineer the reasons why people who were supposed to love you made the choices they made. You do not need that understanding in order to move forward. You do not need a confession from anyone to claim your vindication. The universe does not require their cooperation to balance the books, and that balancing is already in progress. It is not waiting on anyone's admission or apology. Release the bitterness too, and not for their benefit. Release it because it is their energy sitting in your body, and your body has far better things to do than store what belongs to them. Bitterness is nothing more than victory that has not been fully claimed yet. So claim it. Turn the full weight of what you endured into fuel for the purpose you were born to carry, the very purpose they spent so much time and coordination trying to prevent you from reaching. The most complete version of winning here is not the justice that lands on them, though that is coming. The most complete version of winning is you, in full expression, living the life they tried to cut short, operating in your gifts without apology, receiving what was always designated for you, and becoming publicly and undeniably exactly what they told people you were never going to be. A chosen one does not just survive the opposition. A chosen one makes the opposition the origin story of the testimony. You have a testimony now. Use it like you mean it. You are still here, still whole, still carrying everything they tried to extract from you. still becoming everything they organized to prevent, still covered by something they had no access to and no authority over. The choosing was not reversible. It was never conditional on whether your circumstances cooperated, whether the opposition backed down, or whether the people around you decided to support what was happening in you. The choosing happened before any of them knew your name, and it remains fully in effect regardless of every move they made against it. This is the truth the coalition never grasped. You were targeted precisely because of what you carry. The intensity of the opposition was never evidence that you were in trouble. It was evidence of how seriously the other side took your potential. Nobody organizes that much darkness against someone who is not on their way to something real. Nobody invests that many resources in stopping someone who was not genuinely worth stopping. Every collaboration, every cover story, every resource they spent against you was a collective confession that you are the real thing, that in a fair exchange on an even field, not one of them could compete with you operating freely. The bet failed. The plan collapsed. The cover-up is unraveling. The blessings that were held back are moving. Every door that was deliberately shut is finding its way open. The accounting is in full progress, and you, the one who was written off as a cautionary tale, you are the testimony. So here is what you carry out of this. Let the people who are pissed stay pissed. That is not your energy to manage, and not your burden to solve. What they do not get to have any longer is your attention, your access, your peace or your time. You have a life to step into, a real one, the full and uncompromised life that was written for you before any of this existed. Everything they tried to redirect toward themselves is still designated for you. Everything they tried to delay is still moving in your direction. Everything they tried to take is still yours because it was never actually within their reach. Walk into it with authority. Walk into it knowing exactly what you are, who covers you, and what you came through to get here. Walk into it as someone who has been tested at the level that real testing happens at, and who came through without losing the essential thing. You let go. You let God. You let the transformation do what it was built to do. And then you kept moving. Now move. All praise is due to the Most High. Peace. Namaste.